Hey everyone, good evening. It is Dr. Lisa, and thank you for joining Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. I am your host. I am here. It is October. I am back. I am happy. I have a lot going on, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do this podcast today because I've been doing them every other week, and I actually miss giving you all these stories of mine and also miss, talking to you all and answering questions. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to talk about the October ghost stories. I actually have hand claps. I can probably do the audio effects, but sometimes I don't do it. So here we go. We're going to talk about October ghost stories. Of course, I have lots of stories about children who can see ghosts. For those of you who are just joining me, these are children that I've worked with over the course of 20 plus years. I'm dating myself. And over those years, I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of parents, lots of kids, lots of other professionals, even some psychologists who also have the ability to see ghosts. Now, some people question whether or not the ability to see ghosts is true or not. As far as I'm concerned, and speaking with all of these kids, I absolutely believe, which is a question that people ask me all the time, that the paranormal world exists. So you have to be careful with it. I've given lots of tips on how you are able to continue to have this gift, but to also be very, very careful with it on my website. So when you get a chance, go through my website, check it out, read through my blogs. I have 73 of them now. So I have been doing this for over a year, which deserves another cheer. It deserves another clap. I've been going at it for over a year. And as you can see on my website, things are changing. And we'll talk about those things at the end of the podcast. For now, the website address is Lisa, Lisa, Liggins, Liggins, Chambers, CHAMBERS.com. You get the opportunity, go check it out. I added a couple of things. So October Ghost Stories are now pulled out. They have their own separate page. I've added a couple of other pages to my website. One is, guess what? I've been writing parenting journals. If you have not checked out those parenting journals, they're really easy, especially the one based upon this website. Yay! So I have a journal that I created just in time for Halloween, and it is called Kids Can See Ghosts, Can You? With the question mark. And so that is actually available on Amazon. I created another journal, and it is called the Special Education Logbook. Now, that's probably my baby, that one. Love my website, love my blogs, but I love my babies with special needs. And so what I did was I created that journal based upon my expertise, but also experience in special education. And so I'm giving parents different tips. I'm teaching them, what to look out for in the special education process. And it's really simple. And it is in a language that parents can understand. So that is called Special Education Logbook. That one is also on Amazon. I also created, I've been busy, you all. I also created another journal to teach parents how to track the behaviors of their children. So, one of the other gaps that I see is that no one's teaching our parents, how to track behaviors so that they can determine on their own. For example, some of the things that are happening that starts the decline in behaviors at home. So, for example, what precedes the behaviors, now you can document it. Now you can see it for yourself. Now you can track the behaviors. Now you can talk about the consequences. Now you can understand from your vantage point where your kids are being triggered and how to talk to other professionals, such as myself, who want to help your kids. You have that data now. So that journal is also available, and it is called, get this, It's About Time for a Parenting Journal, because it is. It is one of a kind. So go through that. I am teaching parents the ABCs, which is a model of behavior that I've personally grown up with in psychology that I use when I do, or when I did do therapy, and when I teach others to do behavior management in children. So it is something that you can also take to the schools and use and show your administrators and your school psychologists and other teachers how you've been keeping up with the behaviors, either positive or negative, for your kids. So now it is easier for you to talk to these professionals about what's happening at home. For example, when you go to the grocery store, you can write all that down. Now, it seems like it might be a lot to do. It's not. And let me tell you, as a school psychologist, I can share that parents, even myself, can be poor historians because you're already overwhelmed and there's so much going on. So I'm making it easy for you. So, for example, if little Johnny has a tantrum, that's a behavior you write down, the date and the time, how long it lasted. Then the next time, right before you see little Johnny start working himself up, you can write what preceded that behavior and then what was the consequence. And you'll be surprised at what you will learn when you track data. And guess what? That's exactly what we do. If you came to me and brought your kids, I would want to know a breakdown of what's happening at home and how long are the tantrums, or how long are they head banging, what is happening before it happens, what kind of discipline are you doing, or what are the consequences. So that's the ABC method of behaviors. So there are other journals published on Amazon as well that I've been creating, little stuff that I've learned along the way. For example, kids that have fine motor concerns and need graph paper, that's on there. That is something that benefited someone close to me. And so I say, you know what? That is something that helps. So when they stack those math problems together, sometimes kids that have fine motor challenges, they don't line them up correctly. And it's not that they can't do it, they just need a little extra help. So that's there. A little artist book, because I actually have a little artist at home. So I dedicated that to him. So I'm doing quite a bit, doing a lot of public speaking engagement. So to be honest, that's not even what has me busy. That's just other stuff that I'm doing. So I actually have probably two more journals coming out. I'm trying to target different things that I've seen in psychology that's missing. For example, with teen girls, with grief. So I have some stuff coming. So TBA on those last ones, but I'm working on something big. So that's coming. So this is probably 50% of the reason why I haven't been able to get on the radio every week. It's every other week until I finish the other 50%. When I get the other 50% done outside of all this writing and thinking and public speaking, then I'll be back on here every week with you. So I hope you guys understand that and stick with me, because I will be here every other week. And again, I will go back to every week. I just need a couple of weeks to get a lot of this stuff done, a couple more weeks. However, if you do want to get in contact with me, make sure you check my Instagram page, and you can always email me, as I say every other week, at kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. Lots of questions coming. And I appreciate that. And I'm going to take the time after we go through blog 73 to answer, one or two questions. And then I'm going to dedicate a blog in November just to answering some of your questions. One more thing before we start the blog. This is fun and I like it, telling you guys about these stories. But one thing that I noticed is that I'm starting to get a lot of questions. When I say a lot, I mean a lot of questions pertaining to mental illness, pertaining to different questions about psychology, or some relationship questions and stuff like that. So I can talk about kids that can see ghosts a little bit longer, but then I think I got to change this blog toward more self-help. So live questions about, how I can help. I love those relationship questions. My boyfriend cheated on me. What do I do? Well, get another boyfriend. It's as simple as that. I'm just joking, but so when you go to my website in a couple months, you will see another page dedicated to more self-help things. And then I don't have that figured out yet, but that's what's coming. So I'll tell you, I have a lot going on. I do, but I want to talk to all of you. And it starts right now. So let's talk about October Ghost Stories, blog 73. This one was a little hard to write when I wrote it because I had to go way back in my brain and figure out how I wanted to write this one. I'm human. All of my stories are true. These are all things that actually happened to me while working with kids who were my clients for psych testing or who were my clients for therapy. These are their stories. And so this is something that consistently happened to me while working with these kids. And thank you guys for joining me too. I meant to say that. I appreciate it. All right. So one of the this is blog 73 on my website. One of the most consistent ghosts that I heard about over and over and over again was in building 3, a male, a dark entity that was in that building. So what I decided to do was to go back, think about some of the things that the kids said to me about this entity, and then write it up, and then kind of look at some of the notes that I had back then and tell you a story about it. So let's talk about it. When all of the kids would come and see me, there were the buildings that I was in were active with hauntings, according to children and according to families. Now, disclaimer, I wouldn't have known this. I just took a job. I don't see ghosts, so there's nothing that I would know about this. They were just beautiful buildings. So there were 3 buildings, but then the 4th one was different. It was unique. And there's a story behind that, but I'll let you read the blog about building 4. Building 3, however, I noticed that, and it all started with child A. Child A is way like blog 3 to 5, maybe, if you want to know about child A. But I noticed that child A focused a lot on that building and also focused on this dark entity that was in the building. So I was a skeptic. Honestly, didn't believe it. I've had experiences with kids with paranormal in the past, but never like this. Because what happened was kids continued, and parents too, who could see ghosts, parents too, who could see ghosts, continued to tell me about this stuff, this same entity over and over and over again. So this is how they would describe it, and I can still see it. If you're looking at me, I can still see it clear as day, the way that the kids would tell me. So, for example, the kids would talk about, ooh, they would go, ooh, it's just dark, or ooh, it's just mean, or ooh, it's just, the mother would go, yeah, you can't go. Mothers, not a mother, mothers would just go, don't go over there. Or there was a dad who said the whole land was, haunted and blah, blah, blah. But this thing would actually sit on the top floor, either in the window or the door, and just stare, according to them, when I would have kids outside that I was working with. So sometimes with therapy, with certain kids or maybe certain adults, you have to change your environment. So you can't always do talk therapy in an office. You can't do that. So with some kids, because I primarily treated kids, it's just that the families, you want to obviously have some connection to the families, and I always do, always have connections to my families. And so when we would do therapy with a lot of my kids, especially the ones that had, excuse me, inattentive concerns. I'm getting hoarse. I would take them outside because they just couldn't sit. So that means that either we would be walking past that building, or I like to walk my families out to their cars too. I always do that. I'm a perfect gentlewoman. So I would walk my families out to their cars. And so that's how they would always connect to this ghost that was in building 3. So that was not where my office was located. So I started hearing things like, it's dark, it's scary, it doesn't like God's angels, it's mean, it's done something in the past. Ooh, don't go up there. It doesn't like you. It wants to harm you. Yeah, they would tell me it wants to harm you. It's a male, it's really tall, it walks around, it's done bad things, it's demonic, it needs to go to hell, stuff like that. And so that one, there were a lot of, dark, kids call them dark angels, older kids call them demons, adults obviously we say demons. There were a lot of conversations with kids and parents in these buildings with discussions surrounded by, or the topics were dark angels. This one would always come up when we would talk about dark angels. And so it can be a scary thing to constantly hear about this same entity. So one time I was talking to, I give an example. Well, first, let me say, I was a skeptic initially and would think that some of these kids have visual hallucinations. There's a difference between seeing ghosts and actually having visual hallucinations that might be more psychotic. There's a difference. These kids that I treated were not psychotic. And so, talking to me, if you have, so in community mental health, this is the easiest way for me to explain it. You don't necessarily get a choice as to who you want as your clients. You just get whoever's on the waiting list. For me, I would get kids off the waiting list. So these kids didn't know one another. I couldn't disclose who they are. I still can't. It's bound by confidentiality. So when it comes to parents, parents do not know each other either. This is not a small town. This was St. Louis. So, it's a huge town, right? So psychologists, at least the ones with the PhDs, we're the researchers, right? So at some point when you start thinking about, wait a minute, I have 30 kids that I'm dealing with. At least 10 of them see ghosts. They're all seeing the same one in building 3. What the heck is going on, right? And so the kids started warning me against going in the building. And I'm going, yeah, right. I'm going in there anyway. And they were like, no, you don't need to go in the building. Don't go in the building. He wants to harm you. So they didn't want me near the building. I went in once. I wrote about that. That was actually super scary, right? It was a scary building anyway. I'll give you a visual. It was very dark, old Victorian, very dark, beautiful woodworking, work around the molds and the fireplace, and it was like a red color. Um, Probably had multiple families in it at one point. Everybody worked upstairs. It was empty downstairs, which is a relevant point. When you walked in, the house was dark, which is scary in and of itself when you know it's a freaking demon in the house, right? So I was like, I don't want to really go in here, but I'm not a chicken. So, East Cleveland didn't breed chickens. So, you had to prove yourself. So I had to go in there with the kid once, which was a mistake. You got to read about that mistake on the blog. Either way, these families would be communicating with this demon from afar because none of them would go close. So I'll give you an example. I remember, so these were coincidental conversations. This, again, it's not like they were purposely targeting the building, right? they would go outside, which is something that I noticed about all these kids and families anyway, that they would have these subliminal conversations with ghosts. So, like, for example, even the angel that they say is around me, that's really tall, who stands guard over me, they could talk to her too. So it was no surprise to me that these kids and these parents who could see ghosts would actually talk to the demon. And so I have numerous conversations in my brain that I can recall that these kids were talking to this demon, the topics they were talking about these things with this demon, but also they kept telling me, you cannot go in the building. It does not like you. Well, how would you all feel if a bunch of kids and, you know, kept telling you not to go in a building because it's a demon in there that wants to hurt you? Shoot. At some point you listen, right? Because they're all different kids telling the same story. So the house was heavy. I'm just going to tell you, if you didn't read what I wrote, the house was really heavy. When I went in with child A. And when we got in, through the back in the kitchen. Then we went around the corner, if you can see me on social media. And then when you go around the corner, bam, like most Victorians, the staircase goes up. So we get to the staircase, and mind you, this kid's mother is behind me, and this kid is in front of me, and this kid turns around and pushes me out the building and says, "No, you have to leave. You have to leave." And I'm like, why? And this kid said, it's something upstairs that's dark that wants to hurt you, Dr. Lisa. You have to get out the building. And I'm standing on the steps like, really? And the mother goes, well, if I were you, I would get out the steps because my kid can see whatever you can't see. So I'm like, well, crap, we better get out the building. Now I'm dramatic now, but at the time I was like, okay, we better get out the building. So we turned around, and when we got outside, I said to child A, what happened? And this kid said, something in there wanted to hurt you in particular. And I'm going, really? Now you got to remember all this in real time when it happened. Just think about it if you were in that situation. And I said, really? And this child A said, yeah, yeah. When we were walking up the steps, all I saw was gray smoke. This kid said, gray smoke is never a good sign. It's something ominous in there that wanted to hurt you. So I had to get you out. It was you, which is why I was pushing you. I had to get you out of the building quickly. So that's what happened that day. And after that, I kept hearing about this thing. And so, you know, what I decided to do was my own research, because I had heard about this entity so much that I wanted to know more about it. And I wanted to know if it was true. Are these kids telling me the truth? Or are they all psychotic? And I'm not saying psychotic to be funny. I am saying this as a psychologist, but also as back then as someone who had to learn over time how to distinguish between symptoms of psychosis like active visual hallucinations versus kids can see ghosts, right? So I decided to do my homework. And this is where it got interesting. I did two things. One, looked up some archives on that land because one of the kids' father, a kid that I saw, the father could see ghosts, and the mother could too, but that's another story. And the father said the land it's nothing but spirits all over the land. It's the land. Something happened on the land. That's not good. Like I can see like I'm pointing with my hand like this, like the whole land. Like the way that this father described it was the whole plot of land for that whole area, you know, had disturbances. So I said, what the heck? So I actually researched, and I'll tell you about that. And then I called my coworkers, and that's when I got blown away because They knew about it. Yep, they knew about it. My coworkers knew about the ghost, which still baffles me to this day because the things that they said to me was very relaxed. They were like, "Oh yeah, we do. We named him. I'm just gonna give you a name. I don't remember what his name was. We named him John." And imagine how I felt on the phone. I'm like, "Wait a minute, you have an entity with you like now?" And one of them said, "Yeah, when I come in the building in the morning, John greets me." And I'm like, "A ghost?" I will never forget the conversation. Yes, it walks around. It is here. And we all know it. And I'm like, "So you guys are okay with this? Like working while there's like a ghost?" They said, "Oh yeah, John's been around for a long time. He walks around when we're upstairs. We can hear him walking like in the attic and stuff." It, are you all looking at me like I'm crazy? Because that's how I felt. But this is a true story. And so I'm like puzzled. Like, so what else? So it's definitely male. They're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we see him. He's a dark shadow that walks around, especially." And you can feel, somebody else said, you can feel the um, evil, right? Because I talked to someone else, and this person said, "Oh yeah, it's definitely haunted. That's why I wanted out of the building." So my response was, "So the kids aren't hallucinating. Like, these aren't visual hallucinations. This is actually a ghost in building 3, which was an administrative building." And they're like, "Yeah, it's haunted." Well, why is everybody so calm about it? That was my thing, Okay, so I'm excited because I'm like, okay, my kids aren't psychotic, right? Put that aside. My babies aren't psychotic, right? Now they see ghosts, but when did this become a thing, right? And when is this, how did this happen? When did this get real? I didn't learn about this stuff in school. So for me, I'm sitting there like, there is really an entity in the next building that the kids see. And I kid you not, after that, it felt like every kid that I worked with from that moment did not like building 3. It was building. Initially, they didn't like building 2 either. But they kind of grew to used to seeing a little ghost boy. I wrote about him before and things like that. But they did not like building 3. Like, none of the kids except child A would go near building 3. And so, listen, the families were being truthful with me. Of course, they had no reason to lie. Um, but at the same time, the behaviors that I deal with in children can cause some of them to be manipulative. And so you do have to always keep you know, your psychologist hat on while you're dealing with these things. So I've been keenly trained and aware of, you know, different manifestations you know, of the mind in kids, for example, wanting to get their way or, being manipulative, different behavioral things. So I was very aware of, the possibility for all of these kids to just be lying to me, right? That wasn't the case because then when I researched again, let me tell you what I found. Because something within me wanted to read more about the building based upon what the father has said. And some of the staff told me a couple of things about the building as well. For example, for example, building 4 being a place of residence for the Catholic priest that did the seance for the little boy from The Exorcist. That was actually a boy, not a girl. I've talked about that before. I'm not going to bore you with that story, but those are the kinds of things that they talked to me about. And I was like, wow, right? So I'm learning all this stuff. So imagine how I was feeling. Forget the psychology not department. You see where my mind is? Forget the psychology part. The human part of me was like, where do I work? Right? So then I do my research. And I don't remember what I found. It was some type of archive. You guys know how old archives from back in the early 1900s probably look. The beige colored paper, black ink. I don't even know if it's the early 1900s. I'll even say 1930s. I don't know. But it was really old. And there was like something written in this area. I almost gave the area away in St. Louis. It's in St. Louis. It's in the city. It's just a you know, township in the city. But let me say this. That area, it made sense what I found because it used to be that building, I believe, back then was not foster care, an orphanage, not foster care, orphanage. And there was a caretaker. And the caretaker, it was either, this is where I don't quite remember. I would have to research this again. It was a male caretaker who either owned the building and the orphanage or was the caretaker in the orphanage. Either way, that person was male and possibly harmed kids. Like tragically, right? And I forgot to write this in the blog, but I'll tell you because it just came to me. The father actually said that in one of his visions about the building, there was a kid that fell out the window from the second floor, which is where they see or used to see this demon, right? I remember that. And so the kid, when he was looking at the land, he said that the kid was either pushed out the window or what he could see. I don't know how he did that, so I can't answer that question, but he could see the kid's spirit falling, right? And that's why he and his wife are going, oh, it was just a lot of stuff that had happened, on that land. And it made sense when you tie it to it being an orphanage, right? It was during the time of war. Many kids were left behind. Somebody had to take care of them. There were no child rights back then. So a lot of it made sense to me. One of the mothers had said to me, this demon is stuck. I don't necessarily believe in a purgatory period myself, based upon my own religion, but this is what this parent said to me, that this demon needs to go to hell because it's in hell. Well, I mean, it's hell the way he's trying to give everybody hell, especially me, right? Back then. All right, that's my joke for today. You need to laugh at my joke. And so it blew me away, not just the fact that the staff knew about this, but that some of the research kind of went along with the stories, right? So then what do you do with all of that information? Well, I validated my kids. Told them, I believe you. I believe you. It shouldn't have taken all that for me to believe them, but a lot of it was just kind of unbelievable, as you can hear. So as I explained to them, because I'm always truthful, I always keep it 100 with the kids, and I told them, I had to have something to put behind me to lay my mind to rest at the time, because I was going back and forth with, is this a visual hallucination or is this truly just a gift that these individuals have, to see ghosts, right? So then here's the thing. There's more, right? Because after that, I don't know what happened after that, but let me tell you. In building two, because this is not even in the blog, I'll just tell you this. We were getting ready to move into building two. And some of the kids were even telling me, you guys can't move into building two. You guys can't move into building two. And I'm like, why can't we move in building two? And they're just looking at the windows. If you think about different brownstones, how close they are, that's how close these buildings were. And they're just looking at the windows going, there's a ghost in there. There's demons in there. There's dark angels. There's this, there's that. I'm like, crap, I don't want to move in building two. I don't know. I can't see this stuff. So I don't want to move into these buildings knowing that these kids are warning me about going into these buildings. And they were like, you can't go in there. They want to harm you. They wanted this, they wanted that. And I'm going, okay, maybe we shouldn't move, into building two at all. And so it got a little scary. And let me tell you, you know what? I'll just tell you all the story and make sure I'm not keeping you guys too long. Okay, we got a little bit of time. It got scary because there were times I had to be in these buildings by myself, right? And toys would just go off by themselves. You know how most parents will say, hey, I get sick of my kids' toys. I told this story before when I was in building two. Actually, when I walked into one of the waiting rooms, and we had toys in there, literally when I stepped into the doorway, all the toys went off. I kid you not. I kid you not. We had a lot of disturbances in these buildings, and the kids started developing anxiety. Heck, most of them had anxiety anyway. And then they started getting anxiety. And at one point, I went to my boss at the time, who was wonderful. And I said to her, we have to do something because, according to all these kids, they keep telling me about ghosts in the building. They're getting anxiety. They were telling me about a little ghost boy who kept running through the first floor of the building, kids hiding behind me because they're like, there's the ghost boy. I mean, it was just a lot of disturbances. And so we went around and we prayed throughout the building too. And yeah, it was a lot. And so it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how not to judge kids. It taught me a lot about, of course, how to deal with kids and parents who could actually see ghosts, how to distinguish that from mental illness, variations of mental illness. It taught me to be more of a researcher. I mean, this was probably a really pivotal time in my career as a psychologist. Again, this is stuff that I had to learn on the fly because it's not imagine a general psychology book talking about kids can see ghosts. That's just not going to happen, right? So the beauty in this is that I've had to work with a lot of kids who can see ghosts, little wonderful kids and parents, but at the same time, it's always been a challenge because you have to be able to discern, can they really do this or not? But in the case of these kids telling me about this dark angel or demon, again, the kids call them dark angels, this actually existed. And adults knew about it who were in the building who don't see ghosts. Now, one of my coworkers has said to me, it didn't follow me into this other building. And she said, and I think because it just stays there for some reason, it didn't follow me. And I was like, I don't want it to follow us into this building. It's enough disturbances in the building. The toys go off, blah, blah, blah. Kids are running. It's a little ghost boy. Did I add that I was heavily pregnant during all this? Very heavily pregnant, 6-7 months. And so I had actually talked about this in earlier blogs, and I'll say this again. One day when I was leaving building 3, I'll tell you this story real quick. There's a lot of stories about these buildings. I believed the kids when they told me that this demon wanted to harm me. And I'll tell you why I believe this kid. Another reason. Another reason I believe this kid is because one day, these kids, not kid, one day went into building 3, and this was before I even knew this entity was in there. And I was walking, again, think about the back of a brownstone down, and you walk up some steps and you go into the door. And again, the kitchen is right there, right? So you go around and then you go up the steps. So I did what I had to do upstairs, came back down, came around, came through the kitchen, got down the door. I must have been 6 or 7 months pregnant, maybe 7. I had a big belly. And got to it may have been 6 steps, down that second step, and bam, completely lost my footing. But I didn't fall. And so when I got down the steps safely, I didn't fall. I don't know how I didn't fall. I've fallen pregnant before on my belly. I did not fall. Well, I know how because the kids told me. But I'll tell you that in a minute. So I get down the steps and I recall looking back. Well, what the hell was that? I recall doing that, and I tell you how I can tell you that what I had on that day, because I looked back and I looked up like, push me. Who? What was that? Pregnancy brain. Your belly is so big, you lose your equilibrium. I just put it off. After learning about this stuff, it was child B who said to me, you fell down the steps of that building over there. And I looked at child B and I remember, because I turned just like this and said, how did you know? And child B said, because he pushed you. I swear. God is my witness, true stories. He pushed you. And I said, who? This was before child B started talking about this dark angel in building 3. And I looked up at the door because there was a small deck and then another door because he pushed you. And I looked up because child A had told me he stood in that door. And so I said, who is he? And the mother said, ooh, it's a demon up there. And then the mother said, you didn't fall. And I said, how did you know? And she said, your angel told me. And she pointed behind me like this, your angel told me. And I said that I didn't fall. And she said, yeah, she caught you. Yep. She said, yeah, she caught you. Yep. That's exactly the conversation. So from that point, I started talking about the situation especially because, how does this go? Okay, so after that, just to kind of end the story, that's when I started finding out that my office, you won't even believe this one. My office was the same office for it was either a psychiatrist or the psychologist, and I'm going to venture to say psychologist, who treated the little boy from The Exorcist. And I think it was psychologist's office because the psychiatrist's office was across from mine, and that's where the little boy psychiatrist was. The family used to stay in the building. I didn't even intend on telling you all this stuff today. This is not even on Blog 73, but that's okay. It's October. The kid who had the seance, Is it the seance? Is that what it's called? I think so. Where they're removing the demon from the person. If I got that wrong, I think it's called seance though. Lived in that building. And you know how I found out? It's because the kids told me and I had to confirm it. And because they kept talking about some little ghost boy. Now, listen, from what I know, the real, first of all, the child was male. I did get that confirmed, and you can actually research that on your own. The person is still alive. So the little boy that they were seeing, which is what I tried to tell them back then, it's a whole different spirit. It was too much of a coincidence because that kid apparently did stay in our building. So when I tell you all that this got pretty darn interesting, it did. Eventually, of course, I had to resign. It was just too much. It was too much. The kids were getting so there were a couple of things. One, I resigned. The kids had a lot of the kids that I saw just weren't getting better because they were already anxious and then coming into buildings like this and they were constantly jumpy and wouldn't go to the bathroom by themselves because they didn't want to go in the hallway because down the hallway there'd be a ghost waiting on. I mean, it was just all kinds of stuff. And again, these are separate stories from different children because again, confidentiality is bound by federal and state law. So I cannot talk about these situations to each other. Matter of fact, I'll tell you something else. Sometimes the kids that could see ghosts, the kids be going right past each other, looking behind me, going, there's a little ghost boy. And I'd be like, oh my God. Oh my God. I have a lot of stories that I can share for October. These are some of my favorite ones. I did not ever resolve, I think, what was happening to the kids when they would see the demon in building 3 because I wound up leaving and having a baby. Actually, my daughter, and she's 12 now, so a long time ago. But these are true accounts from the kids. I'll tell you, I started to look at the building a lot harder. I think in my mind, I wanted to see for myself. I probably would have run. Probably would have made a mad dash. Had I been able to see this ghost and any of them. How about that? Because it was just a lot of disturbances, but in particular, the one that claimed that it didn't like me. Um, I probably would have run. But I think I remember, like, if I would park my car right in front of the building, I remember I would just sit in the car and kind of look like this. If you could look at me, just staring at it, trying to see if I could see anything. Because to me, it was just incredible that all these kids would tell me these different things, you know. And so then I would I had to get up and walk. I was pregnant. So, and some of the kids, remember I said, would actually go outside. Wow, is right, girl. These are true stories. Some of the kids and I would walk out back, and when we would walk, even if some of the kids would go on, like the house would be on my left and the kids would go on the other side, I would look that I would want to see. Because I'm like, if you don't like me, show yourself. So, of course, I was bad. I was Barbie badass as long as it didn't show itself, right? It's like, show yourself to me. You don't like me, show yourself to me. Talking to a freaking ghost, right? The kids can talk to it, though. Now, after a while, they didn't want to talk to it because it was kind of really mean and everything to them. And every time they would see a dark angel, they didn't want to have anything to do with it, except child A, who wound up leaving me. The influence was really strong with this kid from these demons. Child A would tell me a whole bunch of stories, but these kids would see these dark angels, and I'm telling you, each kid would tell me how pretty they look. Dark angels, demons, and they said they had wings. So when they talk about, you know, demons, of course, sometimes they do look scary. Like some of the teenagers would be afraid from the way that they would show themselves to them. But some of the younger kids would go, they're just pretty. You know, they have dark wings. Remember, they're fallen angels, and they look like God's angels. They're just all dark because they're from hell, Dr. Lisa. And that's what they would tell me. And so it was an amazing journey at this one company. And yeah, all of the hauntings. I mean, I still have more stories about the hauntings, but I know we've been on long and I'm not going to keep you any longer. But yeah, if you ever want to chime in, you could do so on Podbean. A lot of you, and I'm so grateful to you, are actually listening to me on social media. Thank you. Next week, I'm going to talk about, actually, I'm going to blog this week about another story that I have from Missouri. It's all in Missouri. No, I'm just kidding. There's Chicago too. I have some Chicago stories. This one is going to be about a lake. Ever seen those lakes that have that white mist on them? I got a story about that I never wrote on my blog. So I'm going to write about that this week and post it between this Friday and this Saturday. So if you have stories you'd like to share, feel free to do so. Chime in on Podbean, or you can always email your story and I will talk about it on the air. Don't forget to take a look at my website. Look at all of the journals that I'm writing for my parents, parenting journals to help you out with some of your kids. Take a look at some of the different links that I have on the website, which is new for my website. The good news is that I'm getting like 1.5 views a day. So, of course, I'm starting to monetize because I'm being asked to do it. So that's what's going on when you see all the ads and stuff and all of the links to Amazon and those different things like that. I'm being asked to do different things, which is great. And I'm grateful. You all have a wonderful up and coming weekend. And I will see. You know what? I might actually come on next week because this is October. Instead of doing work, I'll see you next week. How about that? You all have a good night. Bye-bye.